an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Wall of Storms, chapters 61 and 62, Messenger from Afar, and Parting of the Lotus Seed. In these chapters, there are a lot of changes happening. Oh, so very many. And I'm really not sure how I feel about some of this. Some of it, I don't know, guys. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Kyle for commissioning this episode and commissioning this entire series so far. I can't wait for the third book. I just don't know what's happening here. My understanding is that the author has intended it to be only a trilogy and that was going to be the final book in the series. Correct me if I'm wrong. Kyle commented, "We fucking did it, yo." Indeed we did. This book was so long. I can't believe how many episodes this was. What are we on now? 25. 25 episodes for Wall of Storms alone, not including the first book. That is bonkers, Kyle. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know what I would have done if this fell off and we didn't finish it. I would have been so sad. So these final two chapters, when I say a lot of things change, I mean everything is of a totally different aspect by the time we wrap the book. But the main thing that I want to talk about, as I'm sure many of you anticipate, is what happens between a consort Risana and Empress Gia, aka Regent Gia. Because, okay, I guess we are just gonna be like that about it. God, I don't care for this at all. Kyle says nobody gets what they want and everyone is sad. Accurate. Yes, indeed. I have said before how much I love Risana. There are a lot of cases in which she feels very naive, but that's part of what you like about her, is that her mind doesn't necessarily work in the way that other people's do with regard to political machinations and suspicions, plans. She is pure of heart, is kind of the easiest way to describe her. A person who wants the best for everyone, who believes in Gia right up until the last moments. And man, that whole scene with the two of them is really, really rough. What happens? What do you call a whale in Latin? Because it can't be Deus Ex Machina. It's something Deus Ex Whale. Because a dude gets vomited up by a whale. I gotta tell you all, I really hoped for a moment that this was going to be Kuniguru. I really sort of thought maybe he had survived. And you can imagine my disappointment at discovering that this is some dude that I don't know. That he represents yet another nation that I don't know about. So we're adding another thing into the mix. And that he is going to disrupt my beautiful lesbian romance that I've been so enjoying. Part of me was like, well, Kuni should stay dead. I don't love this. But another part of me was like, yeah, but Kuni thinking that he died and then him being vomited up by a whale is a very Kuni thing to have happen, and I wouldn't be mad at it either. And then no, it's just this fucking dude, and he steals Thera away from Zomi. She chooses, I'm not being fair by saying he steals her away, but it feels very much like it's so sudden. You know, it's just a very last moment pulling the rug out from underneath all of us kind of thing. And probably in regard to this series overall is one of the only times that I felt like the story was a little bit cheap. This dude literally appears like out of nowhere. Part of me almost wonders if he's not like a god or something the whole way that this works. Pyle says, we know about his nation. It's the dudes who originally held Tenryo hostage. Right. Well, when I say involving a whole other nation, all I'm like, really the focus is that they are directly involved in this whole thing in a way that, you know, it's not a historical thing. It's not, we are learning about somebody's history. These people are still out there and there's still shit going on regarding them. And I'm not mad about adding in another nation in theory, but it does feel, like I said, so sudden that part of me just kind of resents it as a storytelling device. And it feels like such a sloppy setup to the third book. Like, he realized that there has to be another story movement, and I better fit this in at the end of this one to set that up for the next one. So I didn't love this. It's not like the actual plot point itself that bothers me as much as the way it was done and how quickly it felt shoved in. But all of that to say, the reason that I'm bringing this up is because now that Thera has been married off to this dude, she is no longer the Empress, despite the fact that she was named by Kuni to be his heir. She has to fulfill her duty and go off with this dude. And thus, Phyro is going to be left to take her place. I know that I have said before how much I don't love the idea of Phyro being emperor, and like, neither does anybody, honestly. There's a real sense in this section of everyone being aware that he's not made for this. Especially Phyro, I should mention. I think that turned me around a little bit on him. Is the fact that Phyro has the self-awareness when he's talking to Thera right before she leaves to say, I was really mad that Dad picked you initially. But now that I'm being called upon to behave like an emperor, I'm realizing that he was right. There's a reason he picked you, and it's because the two of you were really good at this game and keeping your emotions off your face and just generally managing the mask and the theater of being the ruler. And I don't want to do this, and I'm not good at it, and I don't know what the fuck to do. And it made me like him so much more. I mean, I feel like there isn't any series that I have covered where I haven't mentioned how much people having self-awareness matters to me. That is, for me, a major plus to any character, is that they can see themselves clearly, or at least attempt to see themselves clearly, even if they haven't actually managed it yet. And that can happen even with characters who are bad guys, and they'll be aware that they're bad guys, and they're just kind of like, well, I guess I'm just a bad person, and I'm owning that. People who don't have self-awareness are much more realistic, to be honest, but I get so angry that I can't enjoy them. I admit that they need to be in the plot. I know that they have their place. But I can't like somebody who doesn't know who they are and attempt to be better. So Phyro admitting to his sister that he was jealous, and now he's realizing that he's not up for this. that's the first step in being a good ruler, I think, is recognizing part of what made other people good at it and seeing that you don't have that yet. If you are able to identify that, that's also a step towards you being able to establish that within your own personality, potentially. You have to work toward that, and it's certainly not going to come naturally to somebody like Phyro, who is the most Aries character that ever walked. Like, this kid is all fire. And that's why he's called Phyro, right? Like, this is, come on. Impulsive, violent, wants to lash out as instinct. That's like his first go-to reaction to things. And I really will be fascinated to watch him try to learn how to manage everything, especially in light of the fact that Gia is the one managing him now. Now, I'm a little bit bummed, of course. Setting aside the whole romance between Thera and Zomi being dissolved, I'm a little bummed that we don't get to see Thera being Empress for real. However, I feel like we kind of got such a best case scenario with Kuni winning the war in the first book to begin with and winding up being the Emperor that I don't really feel like I have the right to be mad about losing Thera, because there's a sense to me that things can't just keep going on well. And maybe that's something that I need to look at, that I have that sort of attitude. But there is a point at which I think, okay, things have gone well for long enough. It is about to turn the corner. That is not to say her taken off and Phyro being Emperor now is inherently a bad thing. But it's certainly going to be rocky because he's learning. And there is going to be that obstacle of Gia being at his shoulder, whispering to him. I don't want to say controlling him because that feels a little bit strong. But I'm certain that Gia sort of like wouldn't be mad if that was what happened. Gia is... I can't even like dislike her. I feel like the Anchorman, like I'm not even mad. I'm kind of impressed. I don't hate her because I kind of see her point. I get what she's trying to do. She's just so incredibly ruthless that I can't full-heartedly support her. I can't say it without reservation. And what Zomi says to Phyro as she's leaving, I think is excellent, which is, you are going to learn a lot from Gia. She's very good at what she does, and you should absorb as much as you can from her. I even think that the vision that she has for the future of Dara may be the correct one. However, the cost of what she chooses to do can poison the results. And so you are going to need to prepare yourself for the day when you have to pull the reins out of her hands. And I don't know that she's going to let you do that easily. And I love that that piece of advice is something that is extremely well balanced. She's encouraging him to listen because Gia knows what she's doing to a degree. And Phyro is so, like, he's starting, if there's 10 levels of leadership, Phyro's at level 3, So she's not telling him, beware of Gia, straight up, and planting this, doubt in him that's going to cause him to act out against Gia simply because he feels like he can't trust her and therefore has to do the opposite. She really tries to be as fair as she can and say, that bitch knows some shit. And don't doubt that. However, there are consequences to the things that she decides to do. And we see in this how effectively, I kind of thought Gia was going to wind up being more hampered than she is by the reputation of perhaps having murdered, or not even murdered, but the reputation of having orchestrated things so that Kuni was taken out of the picture and she could have the power. I really thought that was going to wind up being more of an issue for her. But it seems like everybody is just so relieved that she's around because Phyro is sort of out of control at the beginning of his solo flight, that it sets everything up for them to be extremely grateful that she's around. And I can't help but wonder, because she is so incredibly calculating, I can't help but wonder whether that was a setup as well. Did she know that Phyro was going to flip out if she denied him something? And she specifically created a situation in which he would be seen as emotional and volatile and not quite ready, so that she could establish herself as oh, thank God we have somebody level-headed. We have an adult here. We are so grateful that Gia is here. It's up in the air for me. It could go either way. It could be that she set it up, or it could be that she knows Phyro and knows that that's likely to happen. Whether she has to do anything to cause it or not is sort of like, I bet she doesn't, you know? So what happens with Gia and Risana? Because Phyro is going to be the one taking over power, Gia has tea with Risana, except not with her, because there's only one cup, which makes it really clear, so we think, that the tea is poisoned. And Risana knows immediately what's going on and is like, why are you doing this? And Gia says, Phyro is going to need somebody behind him who is willing to make the brutal sacrifices that you need to make as a ruler. And you, as much as you are a good person and good-hearted, that's sort of the problem. And he will look to you above all for guidance. And you are going to be soft and compassionate and a conscience. And he can't really afford that. He needs to be kind of cutthroat to do well. And you're not going to be able to support him in that. And it will hold him back. And it will make things difficult for Dara. Because by the end of this book, the Lyuku are not routed. Not even close. They are coming to sort of like this general agreement about how to coexist for now, as the Lyuku wait for reinforcements to arrive. Which we see how that goes down later. And Luanzia, what's up? But Risana, of course, initially it's just like, are you serious? And then, I'm not doing that. And Gia's like, if you don't, you're asking me to drink it. And Risana's like, no, I'm not. I'm not asking you to do that either. What are you talking about? And Risana's like, or Gia, she says, I can't share him with you. Like, it has to be one or the other of us. There can't be two people behind the throne. There has to be a consistent and what's the word I want? A consistent stream of advice that doesn't contradict itself. If we're both there, we're going to be telling him to do different things and he's not going to be able to handle it. He is not super great at critical thinking, you know? And she then sort of does this thing where she looks at Gia, who is refusing to drink the thing, and is like, okay, if that's what you want. And she starts to drink the tea herself. And Risana sees that she's genuinely about to swallow that shit and is like, I can't believe you were about to do that. Smashes the cup out of her hand. And Gia says, I was willing to let my lover be executed for my plans. I watched my husband die for my plans. I am absolutely willing to do what needs doing for the sake of Dara. Which sounds really impressive. This was a great ploy. But Risana's not quite as trusting as I think Gia thought she was. So Risana uses that tea on some rabbit food and feeds the rabbit with it. And it's very clear that shit was not poisoned. And she suddenly realizes that Gia played her, and played her really effectively. And she almost missed it. She almost was fooled. And she's overcome by this, oh my God, I cannot leave my kid with this fucking woman. No. And she yells out for her two servants, because what she plans to do, as she tells Gia later, is use her smoke powers to gather up Phyro and hide the two of them off in some distant land that nobody knows about, so that they can continue to live without being, like, I guess corrupted is the word I want, by all of this intrigue. And she calls for her maids, and instead Gia is standing there. And Gia's like, hey, bitch, bet you thought you saw the last of me. And Gia's like, God damn it, you came so close to just overcoming your own shortcomings. Which it's one of those moments where I'm like, oh, I sort of agree with you, but when you say it like that, you sound like such a condescending bitch. But, you know, she's not wrong, but also, like, Risana's not wrong. I hate it. I hate it all. And basically she's like, so, I was giving you the chance to do this shit willingly, but you're not gonna. So I guess we're gonna have to go to the tower together. Because Risana's original, when she thinks that Gia was about to drink that poison, Risana's like, all right, fine. I will take myself out of the equation, but I can't drink poison. It's going to be too suspicious, and he's not going to trust you. It's going to look bad. Nobody's going to be like, oh yeah, she voluntarily drank poison. We're going to have to make it look like an accident, like I fell off of this tower, and I will jump and do that willingly. So that's when Gia shows up and tells her, she's like, escorts her up to the tower, essentially, to make it happen. And I have to admit, I'm going to miss Risana. I'm going to miss her gentle influence. I'm going to miss her smoke magic. I think it's probably a good idea for the story that she's not going to be able to use, like, the smoke magic isn't something that we've seen many people do, right? So far, I think she's the only character that managed this. I think it's been sort of mentioned that other people can do it, but she has, like, a particular gift. And there does reach a point, if a story doesn't have straight up magic in it in most places, adding that into the equation for the story can be a really tricky thing to pull off and not have it be a crutch, or used as a Deus Ex Machina, or even be just a little bit of a plot hole where readers are like, well, why didn't she just use her smoke magic to do X, Y, and Z, you know? I just, like, so in terms of her role in things, I understand and think it was probably a good idea to take her out of the equation, but it was really nice to feel like there was somebody within the royal family who was extremely empathetic. And she tried so hard to be supportive of Gia, despite the fact that Gia did not have her best interests at heart. And it's a really interesting thing that, depending on how a character is written, them being very naive and trusting can either be incredibly annoying or really touching and heartwarming, you know? And I think that Ken Liu did a really good job of tempering exactly how much we saw of Risana being sweet and trusting. And thus, she has stayed a character that I find likable, rather than being somebody that I find incredibly annoying and out of place. If we had spent a lot of time with her, if she was like chiming in all the time, maybe I would be irritated by her. But she's just been sort of like, I won't say she's been a background character because that's not really fair, but she has only appeared here and there. And so I don't feel like I have gotten sick of her perspective, because she gets sort of, her point of view is sort of dropped in when we have had an onslaught of cynicism from other characters. So every time that she's come up with her sweetness and light, it has been a bit of a relief from other characters who have much more of a bleak or over pragmatic outlook. And it's refreshing. So I guess that's like something to keep in mind. As somebody who would like to write one day, who did for a little while and dropped off of it, characters like this, I think, just need to be used very carefully. And I really feel for her in the way that she got backed into a corner here. She was so worried for her son. And Gia's essentially like, you take Phyro away, and everybody is going to assume that I'm the bad guy. I drove you away, or who knows what. And the two of you are going to be out there supposedly in hiding, and nobody's going to know where you are. People will find you. And you will become a figurehead for a rebellion for the true emperor, while Gia is the usurper who took the throne. They may even think that I drove you out in order to take your spot, or murdered you, or who knows what. So yeah, we can't be having that. That's not going to work. And it's easy to just be like, well, Gia wants to make sure that power stays consolidated because she benefits. But reminder, they are still in the war with the Liuku, so they cannot be divided right now. And there's an interesting detail about Thera as well. When Phyro is not yet the emperor, and Thera, being a woman, has been such a distraction to people that they are like so caught up in the fact that the emperor named a daughter as his successor that we have all of these like scholars arguing about that. Just basically, there's a lot of distraction is like the easiest word to use. I feel like it doesn't entirely encompass what's happening, because I kind of want to find this section actually to talk about it. But, yeah, here it is. Okay. True, the Liuku were running out of supplies, but Dara was in even worse shape. They had lost all the Imperial airships. The treasury was all but empty. Nobles and merchants were grumbling about the long, drawn-out war harming their business interests. The College of Advocates was criticizing the war as not being within the core interests of the intellectually elevated classes. Scholars seemed more interested in censuring Emperor Ragan's unorthodox choice of a woman as heir, which broke all their treasured traditions and beliefs, than the Liuku threat. And worst of all, Marshal Gin Mazzotti was dead, and there was no tactical mind in Dara capable of replacing her. In addition, Kunigaru's final decree was not witnessed by all, and there were whispers that Empress Gia was holding on to power as regent illegitimately. So there is a need here that Gia can see and understand to get everybody on the same fucking page, and Thera being sent away is a major help in that regard. Everybody getting behind Phyro, but Gia being the one that's sort of managing him is comfortable right now for all of them. So yeah, like I said, I can't even dislike Gia. She is an extremely dangerous woman, and you don't want to prove to be an obstacle to her plans, or that shit's deadly. It's not even a question. However, in a lot of ways, I do think that she has the right idea. And I fully understand what Thera's advice was in terms of learn what you can from her, but also watch your back and keep your eyes out for the consequences of some of the things that she chooses to do, which may look like good ideas. And they actually may be good ideas. But look at what it costs and decide whether or not that worked out, really. Because it may look like it worked out. And once you let it simmer a bit, some other shit begins to pop up that you didn't see initially. And Soto, for her part, because she basically overhears the whole thing between Gia and Risana. And Gia asks her, okay, is this it? Because I knew I couldn't keep you on my side forever. I kind of figured there would be a point at which I lost you. Is this it? And Soto says, no, but it's close. And I'll keep your secret, and I will trust that you know what you're doing. But if it looks like you are about to really fuck some shit up and not let go of the reins when you're supposed to, if it looks like you've gotten so addicted to power that you can't help yourself anymore, I am going to tell everybody what the fuck happened. And the first person I'm going to tell is going to be fucking Phyro. So, just FYI. And honestly, I have to admit, I was a little bit surprised that Gia left Soto alive. I kind of thought Soto was going to turn up having mysteriously died as the only witness to what happened. And, that may be how the next book begins for all I know. But Gia is not sentimental. And Soto knowing this and being the only one who does, I feel is an extremely dangerous situation. This woman's basically behave or I'll blackmail you. Or behave because I'm blackmailing you. The blackmail is in progress, I guess. And Gia was willing to let Otho be killed, so I don't see that she wouldn't be willing to have Soto killed. But maybe maybe there's enough of Gia that is worried about her own tendency to desire power that she knows keeping Soto around is probably a good idea in terms of keeping her honest. Because Gia does have enough self-awareness to know maybe she is a little bit untrustworthy in this regard. And there are times where I have felt this way. There's been people in my life who I've kind of resented how much they will judge things that I do. But I also know that I need that. And I need people in my life who will tell me if I'm fucking up or if I'm being really kind of just selfish. If I'm just, being a little bit too much myself. And if you are an intelligent person, you value the people in your life who are willing to call you out like that. And I'm hopeful that Gia values Soto for this reason rather than seeing her as a sheer threat. And if so, that means that Gia is still redeemable. But Soto does point out that Gia's sort of depending on redemption. Gia knows that she's doing quasi unforgivable shit in the hopes that the ends justify the means and everybody will kind of forget how the sausage was made. You know, add another metaphor to the mix. You get it. And I think that Gia didn't really look at it that way until Soto said something, and I'm hoping that kind of, I don't want to say snapped her out of it, because, I mean, A, it didn't, and B, she can't just stop the way that she is. She can't change her personality. But I would like for that to be something that she keeps in mind a little bit, you know? So, yeah, hopefully she doesn't do anything to Soto, because I would really like to have that lady around as the voice of the reader, in a way, being like, Gia, what the fuck are you doing? So anyway, I've talked about some of the major issues, the major plot points of that part of the story. But I'm going to back up a little bit, because chapter 61 opens with Gia and Pekuvaju. And Pekuvaju is here with Tanvanaki. And they are being really, really demanding. And Gia's doing a lot of posturing, because they are selling the common people on the surface story of that battle they just went through, which is Dara won. We're stronger than they thought. We have a way of defeating them. They aren't as scary as they looked at first. We're figuring it out. The problem is, as much as a lot of that is true, they have figured things out. They have created weapons that are effective. They are incredibly time-consuming and expensive to make, and cannot be made in the numbers that apparently will be required, because they're talking about being joined by 100 other Garrinafins that are coming over the sea. Now, they may be talking out of their ass. As we see later, it seems that they were their allegations were actually substantiated. However, those people aren't going to turn up the way that they thought. But in this moment, Gia is super duper aware that as much as they're telling everybody we're in such a strong position, it's not really substantially true. They don't really have a leg to stand on. They made a really good show and held their own and did admirably despite the odds against them. But that's really the best that can be said, and there's not a lot of hope in her that they would be able to pull this shit off a second time this soon. So, Tanvanaki and Vaju are asking for a tribute, because those locusts ate all their fucking food. And essentially the deal is, we won't attack you as long as you give us some of your harvest. And initially, Gia is just not interested in even considering it. But Zomi pulls her aside and is like, look, it's our fault that they don't have anything to eat. And our people that are in their custody are going to starve to death if we don't acquiesce to this. They make a deal that is this tribute will go up 10% every year, which I think it's the kind of thing that you agree to in the moment with with your fingers crossed behind your back, hoping that you're going to be able to figure out a way out of it before that. 10 years goes by and all of a sudden you're paying double what you were. That's not a sustainable thing. But Vaju is really leaning on her and enjoying the position that they have. And it turns out later, they aren't in as strong a position as they had made it sound. But that is a kind of a short-lived thing. Because at this time, Pekuvaju, this moment is so terrible. So they ask for all of the jewelry that the two women are wearing. And Zomi has the fireberry necklace around her neck that she has to remember Luanzia. And she begs to be able to keep them, but she can't convince them. And it's a weird moment that feels just cruel for the sake of it. Like Pekuvaju is just kind of poking at her and making her give up something that means a lot to her just for the sadism. But then we find out that these fireberries are... Oh my god, wait. Is Pekuvaju and Tanvanaki the same person? You guys... Oh, I didn't even realize it. I'm such a dope. They're the same person. Why am I like this? Alright, look. I'm going to just say this. I say this with the total understanding that this is how things actually work in certain cultures and history. But the changing of character names once they become a ruler is really, really confusing to me. And I just get tripped up by it a lot. I would love to a bit of an explanation of how they come to choose the names that they do. Because I think if I had a reason, that would help me remember the new name. And I don't really... It just feels like very arbitrary. Like, oh, we just picked this name that I've never heard of or seen otherwise in the book. It's not like we're emulating somebody else that we've seen that died or anything like that. It just seems arbitrary. I know it's probably not, but for me, without any information, it feels that way. So I just wish I had a little bit more information on how the names are chosen, especially for like, Kuni turns into Emperor Ragan. I think Thera's Empress name is like Una. I don't remember the one that they wind up picking for Phyro, but I just don't really understand where the names come from, and I would like a little bit of help with that. If anybody knows, even not necessarily in this book, how he picked the names that they chose, but if you guys have information on the way this sort of thing worked in a specific culture where people took on a new name if they got a title, I would be interested in hearing how that went and how that was determined usually, historically speaking, because I'm super curious about that. The idea of just changing your entire name is really interesting to me. It's like, essentially, you are leaving behind the person you were when you weren't in charge and taking on a mantle in a very particular way. It's almost, this is a weird comparison to make, but it almost reminds me of like Beyonce having her persona that she says Sasha Fierce is the girl that she pretends to be when she's on stage. Because Beyonce may to us all be a name of somebody who like is a symbol of glamour and talent, but that is just her name, and for her that is not enough. So she takes on this aspect in order to be who she needs on stage. And this sort of reminds me of that a little bit, I mean, that's basically what Thera says to Phyro when they're saying goodbye, is like, you can't afford to let everybody see what you're thinking all the time. You are on stage from now on at all times. And if you can't manage to keep that shit to yourself, maybe you should do what our dad did, was make that crown of cowrie shells so that people couldn't even see his face. And, he did what he needed to do in order to keep his thoughts his. Because he was aware that he has too expressive a face and that it was influencing people. So... anyway, all that to say, I understand, I think the theory behind why you would do it, but I just don't understand the choice of name that they go with and what it means. And, Tanvanaki being Pekuvaju, where did Vaju come from? Her father's name was Tenryou, which was his first name. Was this their last name? Was he Tenryou Vaju? And she's Tanvanaki Vaju? I don't feel like we've seen that at all before. But anyway, I had mentioned last episode about the Tuliyusa, which was mentioned as something that the Ryuku were searching for. And it was a plant that was really, really necessary for the health of the Gorinafins. And they could not seem to find it anywhere. And the reason that she made this deal about the jewelry is because she spotted what Zomi was wearing around her neck and recognized it and wanted to get her hands on it so that she could take a closer look and figure out where Zomi had gotten this. And it says a spicy plant whose fragrance and flavor resembled fire. The berries were a powerful hallucinogen used in the religious ceremonies honoring the All-Father, Every-Mother, and their many children. Even more important, the Toliusa was critical to the reproductive cycle of the Gerinifins. Females had to consume large quantities of Toliusa berries to give birth to healthy young. Because the berries had such powerful hallucinogenic effects, and the Yuku did not want the Gerinifins to give birth to many babies during the long voyage from Yuku to Dara, Pekyu Tenryo had kept the supply of Toliusa all on his ship in a secured storeroom. That was the room that Luanzia had burned down. So I had forgotten about the whole burning a room down and that it had something significant inside of it. I think at the time I had guessed that it was Gerinifin eggs or something like that. And it turns out to be sort of on the same lines. It's crucial to the Gerinifins and continuing for them to reproduce. But it turns out that this is just a very rare thing in Dara, and she somehow just spotted these around Zomi's neck and recognized them and realized what was going on. Throughout the negotiations with Empress Jia, the Pekyu had struggled to present a false image of confidence and power. Because they were cut off from the Toliusa, the Gerinifins had not been able to give birth to new hatchlings since their arrival. The adults were growing increasingly unruly, and if a new supply couldn't be found soon, Pekyu Vaju was going to be forced to execute some of the Gerinifins for safety reasons. But now, the gods had smiled upon the Liuku. There was Toliusu in Dara. So they go to the location where the flowers that look like lava are sitting, and they are all cheering and weeping tears of joy. Years ago, when Pekyu Tenryo had sent his exploratory expeditions to Dara, one of his ships had tried to pass through the Wall of Storms. The ship had been wrecked, but the supply of Toliusa they had carried as a way to speak to the gods on the long journey had survived, washed ashore, passed through the guts of birds and animals until the seeds took root here, in the most inhospitable volcanic rock of the islands of Dara. So I like that detail. This isn't just some native plant that grows... Oops, sorry, I kicked a box under my desk. This isn't some native plant that they just happen to track down in Dara. This is from where they are from. And it managed to get through. And that's some shit that, it may sound a little bit ridiculous, I think, but I really buy it, because this is such... invasive species. This isn't an invasive species because it's really only living on this mountainside and that's it. But this is a thing that happens. Ships, there are all kinds of animals and algae and various types of plant life that become embedded in things on the ships. And then when people get off in another location, that stuff comes with them. There's actually a thing here in the summertime, because we live on the largest lake in Texas, and there's these things called zebra mussels, I think they are, that grow on the hulls of speedboats and fishing boats, and they are super duper invasive. So it's a standard practice that when you get your boat taken out of the lake and you put it in a different body of water, or vice versa, you have to undergo really rigorous cleaning of the hull before you are allowed to put down, because they are super worried about bringing that with you and killing everything else in the lake. So then we go to the moment where they discover this dude who is vomited up by the whale. There's a lot of discussion here about the way they hunt the whale, the things about the whale that are worth a lot of money. I'm not going to get into all of that. There's not time. But I will say that I did find it interesting. I also didn't know that amber, like living amber described here. I was just yesterday looking at the description of a scent. And amber is listed as part of the scent profile. And I was like, what does that mean? Because all I know of amber is that it is a color and it is a petrified wax, or not wax, sap. A scent associated with amber. I thought, is this just a, like, it's supposed to be the impression of like, oh, this scent makes me think of rich honey. And so we say amber. I was like, I didn't understand. And now I'm realizing that this is probably where it comes from. I just never knew. It's so funny how this came up just the next day after me reading that description and being like, what the fuck? And I didn't even look into it. You know, usually when I have that kind of question, I'll Google it and be like, give me the answer. And I didn't do it. And I love that I got the answer anyway. So living amber is incredibly valuable. And so these whalers don't even kill the whales if they can help it. They like basically chase down the whales until the whales are so exhausted that they vomit it up, which is kind of fucked up, but what can you do? They collect it, they let the whale go, and then they, you know, come back another day in order to hunt the whale again, kind of like they're farming. And so they're chasing down this one whale that's going way, way closer to shore than they expected. It vomits up this amber, and it turns out that there's a dude in there, and he says, kill the whale. Then he collapsed and stopped moving. Can you guys remind me why he says kill the whale? Why is he so mad about this whale? Like, this whale kind of saved his life. Why kill it? I don't remember. I feel like maybe that was mentioned and I missed it. Ms. T says, look up ambergris. Oh, I've heard of the ambergris. I never put together that they're the same thing. Oh, thank you, Ms. T. That's interesting. See, I learned so much doing this, guys. Thank you. Yeah, I had no idea. Never even occurred to me. Because I thought ambergris was like, because they mention another thing that's gotten from this sort of like waxy node in a whale's head that is used for lubrication. And I think I thought ambergris was that ambergris was used for lubrication. I didn't realize that was something that was for scent. Especially because that, I think of ambergris as being a cosmetic item, and it's mentioned that wax is used in cosmetics, but I just got the two things like mixed up. So that's where, oh, cool. No doubt. So we get a story about, Takval, which is the name of this dude. I am called Takval Aragaz, son of Sulian Aragaz, daughter of Nobo Aragaz, last Peku of Aegon. He relied on simple words accompanied by many gestures, but the import of what he was saying was clear enough. So I'm going to I only have like a little over 5 minutes left, so I'm not going to get too much into the story. But basically, he and some people, his people, are all enslaved. And they managed to get the fuck out after being on a ship and things not going super well, and overhearing that the guards are planning to maybe just murder a bunch of the slaves in order to lighten the load and, you know, increase their own odds of survival. So, yeah. Takval overheard the captain talking late at night with his senior officers. Without the assistance of the clever Dara barbarian, Luanzia, I love that he's called that, clever Dara barbarian, the calculations for the second expedition had been off. They were running out of supplies, and the proposed solution was to toss some of the slaves overboard. And so Takval Aragaz had come up with a daring plan. Late one night, he overcame the guards of the watch on deck, stole one of the coracles, filled it with goods that he would use to bargain for the future of his people. And he gets in, rows away. He tries to go through the wall of storms. He's like heading toward it and just being like, you know, I may not make it, but I gotta at least give it a shot. Then a great dome-headed whale breached near his coracle, capsizing it. The whale swallowed him and his goods, and the rest was a long dream. So he was in there, I would imagine, like a week, maybe? I mean, how long could he survive? He's not able to eat, I would imagine, you know, like maybe that ambergris has some nutrient to it. I don't know how, maybe. And he makes this deal. He points, oh, that's why he says to kill the whale. Because it's got the eggs in it. I forgot. See, I knew that it was mentioned and I was like, I couldn't remember what it is. He has Garinifin eggs. There are dozens of them. Dozens of them. And his deal is, if you will essentially give me your daughter and create this alliance between the two of us, I will teach you how to get them to hatch, raise them, and get them to listen to your orders. But I guarantee you, you can try and seize these eggs from me if you want. They will not survive if you don't have somebody who knows what they're doing to guide you along the way, because the shit is not... It doesn't sound like it's the kind of thing that's just intuitive. You need real information. So Thera decides that she wants to do this because it is, in some ways, it's just the most interesting thing, which is, you know, it was her father's, his policy to do something interesting when he could. And also she has like this grand idea of what could potentially be the future for Dara. And she sees that this could work and tie in with that. But I really love Gia basically is like, we will fuck this dude up until he tells us everything that we want to know about how to raise these things. And we will not make you marry him. Don't worry. And Thera says, if you so much as try any of these tricks, I will strip you of all your power. We have seen what costs your methods impose. I, for one, am not willing to pay them. You are indeed stronger than your brothers, Gia muttered. And she asks her mom if she was disappointed that she was named over her brothers. And her mom says, no, I believe that he, you know, picked whom he believed was the right person. And I believe that you probably are. But the fact that you are strong and you know what you want does make my job a little bit harder. So she goes off with this dude to head back through the wall of storms. And they are watching as the Liyuku are heading toward them through the wall, because more of the Liyuku have been scheduled to appear and back up the previous batch that came through. And they see them heading through, and it looks like, well, here we go. And then Thera's like, oh my God, wait. Oh my God, wait. Oh my God, wait. Zomi was right. Because the walls come together, the storm walls come together and begin to absolutely destroy these ships. And I love this whole thing, like the fact that Thera sees that Zomi figured this out, and that Thera is moved by the fact that these people are dying. she isn't just like, ha ha, fuck you guys, which honestly would be warranted. I wouldn't be mad at her at all. She is imagining with a ton of compassion, what it must be like for them to watch their death come toward them, and feels really bad for them and has to look away. Meanwhile, Takval thinks, oh my God, this means that we can't get through at all. And this is like, in 10 years, I don't know what's going to happen to my people. And Thera's like, no, don't worry. We've figured out a way. And they've created these appendages on these ships to make sure that they can duck under the water and travel beneath the wall of storms. I am almost out of time, so I can't get too far about, like, I can't get too much into the battle with that one Garinafin and the signal kites. But it is a pretty good, like, last-ditch action sequence for this book. I thought it worked out, like, I thought it was interesting to read. And they managed to get past it. By the time the Liuku city ship finally arrived on the scene, all the crew could do was butcher the Garinafin carcass and retrieve useful supplies. Not a single man or beast had survived from the second Liuku fleet. The Thanes on board mourned their comrades and did not relish the thought of reporting the news to Pekuvaju back home on Rui. And the reason that they came through thinking that this was the time was because Luanzia gave them bad information on purpose. And he wrote that poem and left a bit of code in there that eventually Zomi was able to decipher to figure out that the timing was off. And she began to put it together. Oh my God, I think that actually he is setting a trap. And that's exactly what it is. And honestly, Luanzia, the gift that keeps on giving, your brain should be pickled and put on display, sir. So the last thing that I'll talk about, because I feel like I've hit all the major things, is what happens with the gods. And I don't remember what the name of this god is, but there are two having a conversation because one of them is deciding to give up his immortality and live as a mortal, because that is the only way that they can travel through the wall of storms into this other territory. Lutho. Thank you, Kyle. I want to gaze upon new lands, and Dissolver of Sorrows, led by your protege, is as good an opportunity as any. I'll be just another member of the crew on this grand adventure. We'll miss you. No god of Dara has ever done what you're about to do. There's always a first time for everything. And that is the end of the book. And I am delighted that this author has included the gods along with everybody else as evolving creatures that are influenced by what's happening just as much as they are able to influence things. It's a fascinating way to like have these little punctuations in the story. It was the sort of thing that when the book started, I didn't really get what he was doing. And as things continue and I see the changes in the conversations, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting and neat. It takes a long time to sort of pay off effectively, but I think it was worth it, you know, and I find it really like, I don't know. I think that's a really cool idea, showing how the gods are not constants and they are not just these implacable forces. They are susceptible to humanity and mortal influence, which is really, it's not a new idea, but it's fun to watch it become true rather than hear about it after the fact, which is something that is often done in stories. We'll see a god that's sort of like fallen out of popularity and they are lower in power because not as many people worship them, and what's done is done. But here we're actually getting to sort of see the changes in the way that they are conflated with other gods, and I just think that's really interesting. So that's the end of the book. Oh my God. Kyle, remind me, when's the next one coming out? I feel like you said like February of next year. It's going to be a minute. I wonder how long it's going to be. If this book was like, it took 25 episodes to cover this one, I can only imagine. But I am really, really looking forward to it. And I could see people not liking this book as much as the first one, because the first one is such it's a story filled with a lot more tropes than this one. And that's why I like the second book better. I think it's got more heart to it in a way because it's allowed to spread out and explore more. And I think that it is able to do more compelling things because of that. So, okay, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you guys again so much for hanging out in the chat. Thank you, Kyle, for commissioning this all. I hope that everyone listening has been enjoying the coverage. And I'll see you again eventually when that next book comes out. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.